Undercover CEO caught an employee stealing cash but couldn't fire him, and the reason behind it will make you cry. Ethan Cooper, the CEO of Titan Sports, had built his company on integrity and fair treatment. But one night, as he reviewed security footage, he caught a young employee, Jordan Evans, stealing cash from the register after his shift. Ethan felt a deep disappointment, but something in Jordan's eyes, the hesitation, the desperation, made him pause. Instead of calling security, he made a decision that would change both of their lives. The next day, Ethan walked into his own store, unrecognizable in a worn-out hoodie, sneakers, and an old baseball cap. He had taken on the identity of Eric, a new stockroom employee. Inside the store, Jordan was already at work, carrying a large box toward the stockroom. His arms trembled slightly under the weight, his movements sluggish, like someone running on empty. As he struggled with it, two employees, Mike and Sean, stood by, snickering. "Come on, Evans," Mike jeered. "I thought you were supposed to be tough." Sean laughed. "Yeah, maybe if you lifted more weights instead of excuses, you'd be able to handle that." Jordan gritted his teeth but said nothing. He adjusted his grip and continued walking. Ethan watched the scene unfold, his fist tightening. There was something off about Jordan's exhaustion. It wasn't just physical tiredness. It was the weight of something much heavier, something deeper. Later in the stockroom, Ethan found Jordan stacking sneakers in silence. His hands were calloused, his movements robotic, as if exhaustion had settled into his bones. Ethan grabbed a box and started helping. "You always let them talk to you like that?" Ethan asked casually. Jordan glanced at him, surprised by the question. "It's just how it is. Not worth fighting over." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I don't know, man. Seems like they got nothing better to do than run their mouths." Jordan chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, if you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly their favorite person around here." Ethan leaned against a shelf. "Why's that?" Jordan hesitated, then shrugged. "Guess I don't fit in." Ethan could tell there was more to it, but he didn't push. Instead, he spent the next few days watching Jordan closely. He noticed how he always skipped lunch, how he stayed late to finish the toughest tasks, and how, despite everything, he never complained. One night, as they closed up together, Ethan casually asked, "You ever eat lunch, man? Or do you just like starving yourself?" Jordan smirked but didn't meet his eyes. "Gotta save money. Food's expensive." Ethan frowned. "What about your paycheck?" Jordan hesitated before answering. "Most of it goes to rent. What's left, I give to my mom. She works 2 jobs, but it's still not enough. So I help out." Ethan processed his words, his respect for the kid growing. "That's a lot of weight to carry." Jordan exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding in a breath for too long. "Yeah, but what else am I supposed to do?" Ethan saw the exhaustion behind Jordan's eyes, not just from the long shifts, but from the endless cycle of struggle. The way he carried himself, the quiet strength in his voice, the way he refused to complain. It was all starting to make sense. One particularly rough evening, Ethan found Jordan massaging his shoulder, wincing slightly. "You good?" he asked. Jordan shook his head. "Just sore. I barely got any sleep last night." "Why?" Jordan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Power got shut off at home. Couldn't pay the bill. My mom was stressed out, so I stayed up trying to figure something out. Ended up sleeping on the floor because my bed was too damn cold." Ethan clenched his jaw. This kid was dealing with way more than just bad coworkers and long shifts. He was fighting a battle no one in that store even knew about. The next morning, as Jordan went to his locker, he immediately noticed something unusual. A small white envelope sat neatly on top of his worn-out gym bag. His eyebrows furrowed as he picked it up. There was no name, no writing on the outside. With hesitant fingers, he tore it open and froze. Several crisp $100 bills stared back at him. His heart pounded. His eyes darted around the empty break room, searching for an explanation. This had to be a mistake. Stuffing the envelope deeper into his locker, he pulled out a small folded piece of paper that had slipped inside. His fingers trembled as he read the simple handwritten message, "For when you get hungry, no questions asked." Before we continue with this story, if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you stories that will inspire and change the way you think about leadership. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do it now and join the Undercover Files family. Jordan's throat tightened. His stomach had been gnawing at him for days, but he had grown used to ignoring it. Still, he couldn't accept this. He didn't take handouts. He exhaled sharply, shoving the envelope into his backpack before slamming his locker shut. From across the room, Ethan watched, carefully reading Jordan's every reaction. The flicker of shock, the hesitation, the quiet storm of emotions playing out on his face. But he also noticed something else. Jordan wasn't pocketing the money for himself. He was contemplating something. That night, as they closed up, Ethan decided to bring it up subtly. "So," he said casually, grabbing a stack of folded jerseys, "did you ever find out who left that money for you?" Jordan scoffed, keeping his eyes on the cash register as he counted. "Yeah, right. Like I'd take charity." Ethan smirked. "And yet it's gone from your locker, so what did you do with it?" Jordan's fingers hesitated over the register keys. He glanced at Ethan, suspicious. "Why do you care?" Ethan shrugged. "Just making conversation. You seem like the kind of guy who'd either throw it away or make it count." There was a long pause. Jordan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck before muttering, "I gave it to my mom." Ethan nodded slowly, suppressing a smile. That was the moment he knew. Jordan was different. Over the next few weeks, Ethan kept pushing Jordan, not in obvious ways, but in the kind of ways that made him think. He'd challenge him to carry heavier boxes, to run across the stockroom faster, to reorganize shelves in record time. It started as a joke, but soon Jordan was beating his own records. And every time he succeeded, Ethan would give him that knowing smirk, like he was proving something. One day after Jordan effortlessly carried a heavy stack of equipment that used to take him 2 trips, Ethan leaned against a shelf with an amused grin. "You ever thought about doing something with that strength?" he asked. Jordan rolled his shoulders, catching his breath. "What do you mean?" Ethan tilted his head, measuring him. "I mean, I see the way you move. You've got control, power. Most guys lift heavy and call it a day. But you're built for something bigger than this store." Jordan's expression shifted, his guard rising. "Yeah, well, dreams cost money, and I don't have any." Ethan watched him closely. That wasn't frustration in his voice. It was resignation. "You ever tell anyone what your dream is?" Ethan asked. Jordan hesitated. No one had ever really asked him that before, not seriously. He exhaled, staring at the ground for a long moment before finally speaking. "When I was a kid, I wanted to play football, not just for fun, for real. I wanted to make it to the NFL." His voice was softer than usual, like he was afraid to even say it out loud. "I was good too. I had scouts looking at me in high school. But my dad left, and my mom started working 2 jobs. I had to help out. Couldn't afford the training, the equipment, none of it." He clenched his jaw. "So I gave it up." Ethan studied him. There it was, the fire that had been buried under years of struggle. Jordan chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "Crazy, right? Some broke kid thinking he could make it to the league." Ethan's voice was firm. "It's not crazy." Jordan looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his tone. Ethan stepped closer. "You've got the talent, Jordan, the discipline. You didn't give up because you weren't good enough. You gave up because life threw obstacles in your way. And I don't think you're the kind of guy who lets obstacles win." Jordan's throat tightened. No one, not a coach, not a teacher, not even his own friends, had ever said something like that to him. Ethan placed a firm hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Maybe it's time that changed." Jordan frowned slightly as if unsure how to respond. No one had ever been in his corner before, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something unexpected. Hope. That night, Ethan made a call. He wasn't just looking for any coach. He wanted the best. After a few conversations, he secured a spot for Jordan with one of the top trainers in the city, a coach known for turning underdogs into professional athletes. When Ethan pulled Jordan aside the next day, the young man was already exhausted from another grueling shift. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, eyeing Ethan warily. "What's up?" Jordan asked. Ethan exhaled, then said calmly, "You start training tomorrow." Jordan blinked. "Training?" Ethan tossed him a business card with an address. "With one of the best coaches in the city." Jordan's fingers tightened around the card as he read it. His chest rose and fell, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. He looked up at Ethan, his voice barely a whisper. "You're serious?" Ethan nodded. "Dead serious. You show up, you work your ass off, and you get a real shot at something bigger." Jordan's throat tightened. His whole life, people had told him what he couldn't do, that his dreams were just that, dreams. But here was a man, a stranger, who saw something in him, who was willing to bet on him. "Why are you doing this?" Jordan's voice was thick with emotion. Ethan's eyes were steady. "Because I believe in you." Jordan swallowed hard, his hands clenching around the card like it was a lifeline. No one had ever said that to him before. Weeks passed, and Jordan trained like a man possessed. He pushed his limits, waking up before sunrise, lifting heavier, running faster. Ethan checked in regularly, pushing him harder, making sure he didn't quit. Jordan didn't. He couldn't. Then one day during a routine staff meeting at the store, everything changed. Employees stood in the break room, laughing and chatting as they waited for the meeting to start. Jordan stood in the back, arms crossed, listening absent-mindedly. Then the store manager stepped forward. His voice was louder than usual, almost nervous. "All right, listen up, everyone. The CEO has an announcement." Jordan barely reacted. Titan Sports had a CEO? Of course it did. But he'd never seen him, never thought much about who ran the company. That was rich people stuff. Then the door opened, and in walked Ethan. But he wasn't wearing his worn-out hoodie and sneakers. He wasn't carrying stockroom boxes or joking around with Jordan. He was wearing a tailored suit, standing with the confidence of a man who owned the room. The breath left Jordan's lungs. His heart stopped. "Number freaking way," murmurs rippled through the break room. Employees stared in disbelief. Ethan cleared his throat. "I've been working here undercover." Gasps, whispers. The room froze. Undercover? Jordan's knees felt weak. His head spun. Every memory, the talks, the training, the encouragement, came flooding back. Ethan's voice carried through the stunned silence. "And I've seen the real culture of this place. Some of you treat each other like family. Some of you don't." His gaze landed on Mike and Sean, the two bullies who had tormented Jordan. Their smug faces fell. Then Ethan turned directly to Jordan. His expression softened. "And Jordan," he said, his voice steady, "he's not a thief. He's a fighter. And today he's officially invited to an NFL tryout." The room erupted. Jordan felt his chest tighten. His hands shook. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The same man who had pushed him had been the CEO this whole time? The man who changed his life? Ran the entire company? What? His voice came out hoarse, barely audible. Ethan grinned. "You earned this, kid. You're ready." Jordan's vision blurred. His heart pounded. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Outside the store, Jordan stood frozen, staring at Ethan, the man he thought he knew, but never really did. "You're the CEO," Jordan finally whispered, still struggling to process it all. Ethan gave him a small, knowing smile. "Yeah." Jordan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "All this time, why me?" Ethan's expression softened. "Because I saw a fighter, a kid who took hit after hit but never went down. I knew you just needed one shot." Jordan swallowed hard, his throat tight. "I don't deserve this." Ethan's brows furrowed. "Like hell you don't." His voice was firm, unwavering. "You earned every bit of this, Jordan. You just needed someone to see it." Jordan blinked rapidly, trying to fight back the emotion threatening to take over. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. No one had ever believed in him like that. He took a shaky breath. "What if I fail?" Ethan smirked. "Then you get back up and try again, just like you always have." Jordan let out a weak laugh, shaking his head. "Man, I don't know how to thank you." Ethan gripped his shoulder. "You don't have to. Just promise me one thing." Jordan met his gaze. "Anything." Ethan's voice was steady. "When you make it, when you're out there on that field, and you see some kid struggling the way you did, be his Ethan Cooper." Jordan's life changed forever. He gave everything he had to the training, and months later he received a call. He had been selected for the NFL tryout. He immediately called Ethan, his voice trembling with emotion. "I got in. I can't believe it. Thank you. Thank you so much." Now your turn. Have you ever had someone believe in you when no one else did? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, share it with your friends. Maybe it'll help someone else.